Well, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very excited about this opportunity to talk to everybody. It looks like we got a really good response from this topic. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this talk is because the last time I had an opportunity to do a Mentor Monday, we had quite a few participants who were teachers who were trying to migrate into the corporate world. And I just so happen to have a daughter-in-law who is contemplating that same move. And so we had a conversation about 6 or 8 months ago, and I was coaching her through, transitioning her resume to something that resonated for the corporate world. And so that's basically the basis of the talk today. Now, do you have to be a teacher to glean any information from this? No, but I just wanted to share where I started. And so that's pretty much my starting place. A little bit about me. I spent about 10 years as a project manager working with an organization who actually did not have a design department. And so we didn't realize that we didn't need design until the poor tech guys who were trying to migrate from green screens to a GUI interface said, Judy, what is this supposed to look like? And I'm like, okay, I'll be right back. And so then I had to go seek out what this interface should look like. I would search the web and see something that was analogous to what our situation was, and I'd put it together. And so fast forward, I had an opportunity to work with UXSA, where there's more of a structure for that type of activity. And so I was in a role where I could do more service design and really understand what the reps were doing on the phone and what they needed, and then translate that into those requirements for software development. And then fast forward, I found human-centered design. Boom, that is where my sweet spot is. And so really kind of picked that up and took that forward. I'd been an individual contributor on an experienced design team for 3 to 4 years. And then I was invited to become a design director for mortgage experience, creating my own experience design team. From there, I went into bank innovation, from there, employee experience, from there into a consolidated chief design office, where I was a design director for about 3 years. And so long story short, in that period of time as the design director, I interviewed, I'm going to say upwards of 200, 250 people over the course of 2 to 3 years. And so with that, I got really good at picking up on what were my needs and what was I getting. And so that's kind of what I want to share with you today. One of the things I want you to take away is keep trying, because sometimes when you apply for a job, you have no idea the chaos that is going on in the corporate environment behind you. And so a lot of times things are shifting left and right. There might be budgets, there might be strategies, there might be visions, there might be personnel, there might be attitudes. You have no idea. A lot of it has nothing to do with you. It just happens to be the circumstance in which your resume hit a pile at that time. So just I encourage you to keep trying, because a lot of times there's just so much moving parts. And so what we're trying to do is get to that kismet, that perfect storm, where your resume lands on the top when you have and making sure that you're ready to be picked up when the situation arises. Okay, so with that, I'm going to share my screen. Again, this is going to be about translating your skills to the destination of your choice, right? So we're going to get started here. Here's a little background: design leader, design thinker, service designer, user experience, employee experience, fell in love with that, about 5 years before, into my career. And then I've been a facilitator for, I'm not even tell you how long, but love doing workshops. So here's an example of a resume that was shared with me. And I just want to kind of go over it a little bit. So it's very simple. A lot of companies today have systems where they consume your resume and they will kind of strip all the content and then throw it into this system where it auto matches the criteria of the job description to what is on your resume. So having a clean resume like this facilitates that. It's very simple, it's very clean. There's not a lot of flowery language. And so it's very easy to process. As you can see, the education is at the top and the professional experience is at the bottom. The cons about this simple resume is it's not outcome-based. It's what are the accomplishments? What was accomplished by this professional in her tenure? What did she do? How can she integrate into the corporate world? So if you have a simple resume like this, and I get it, I'm trying to parse out how I'm going to use this person on my team. So typically when I would have a rec out to hire, I had a very specific list of requirements for that particular slot. It was either on an established team or I was building a team, and I wanted to see, layer up experience. I wanted to have some tenured people. I wanted to have some early career people. And then I might have needed someone who had strong visual design or maybe some service design. And it depended on what we were trying to do. If that service designer was the lead position or if the visual designer was an early career slot. So it just depended. And so with this type of resume, I, as a director and a hiring manager, has to parse this out in a way to make me, like, how can I use this person in my rubric, right? And so this really doesn't give me the information. This is too much work for me, to be honest, right? So it's too much for me to decipher, well, and I'm making a lot of assumptions because this resume is not telling me what she did, how did she do it, how could she integrate into the corporate world, and how do these skills translate into skills and competencies. So if we look at, this next page, again, she's got her technical skills versus her craft, which is a good differentiation of skills. But I don't know if she, Word is pretty ubiquitous, but I don't know what zoology is. So, or schoolology. So I would have to Google that. So that's work on my part, right? And so I don't know what that means. And then workshops, lectures, and demonstrations. Okay, that's really good information, but what did she demonstrate? What was she communicating? What was she trying to deliver to how many? Was it 5 people in a room or was it on a stage in front of an auditorium? Those are 2 very different skills and capabilities, right? And so that's what I really need to know. Again, it's this resume, the onus is on me as a consumer of this resume to parse through these different components. So I want to take some time here and go back to the professional experience. So what I did is I took each line in this professional experience and I translated it into how I would like to see this, what I could consume as a design director that would make meaning for me. Okay. And then I put it in a way so that if I were reading this, I would, yeah, I need someone that, if she's dealing with children, she can certainly deal with the corporate team members of this project, right? So the first one, beautification committee chairperson. Okay, so led committee of 6 team members in location beautification effort for children's learning environment. Right, so it kind of gives me a little bit more background. It gives me the outcome. It kind of puts it in terms that I can consume. The next one is, sorry, I'm having a problem with my vision here. Hold on just a second. I'm trying to move my window here. I might have to exit this real quick to move this way. There we go. Sorry, it was just blocking my view and I couldn't see what I was presenting. There we go. So, so high school credit support teacher for the fine arts department at a middle school. So provided craft and art guidance to 50 students from novice to proficient levels of skill, art and art education. Again, that gives me some indication that she's able to target her audience, to create custom content, to deliver a message. Campus Schoolology support teacher. So a campus expert, coach and trainer for peer teachers on collaborative education platform. That gives me more information. So she has gone out and become an expert on a system that is used in her environment, but she became the expert and the go-to person. That's really good information for me, right? She might be my new sketch expert, right? Or my new Figma expert, right? So that's what I need to know, that she has the capacity and the motivation to overcome that nuance of that new software. So facilitator at a professional learning community. So experienced facilitator for teacher professional development to improve teaching skills and academic performance of students. Art teacher at middle school. So teach art to multiple grade levels, creating age and grade appropriate lesson plans for a group of 25 plus. Okay, so again, what that tells me, she can create audience appropriate content. She can manage groups of 25 or more. She can manage groups that have different levels of energy, right? Because when you consider that in a corporate environment, you know, she's able to think on her feet and move forward. Long-term substitute, experience in managing groups of 25 plus in ambiguous situations, gaining alignment to create diverse set of deliverables in multiple mediums. Again, leader, let's see, art teacher for Abracadoodle, leader of sessions of creativity for 15 to 20 participants of various skill levels, delivering visual art classes, camps, events in schools, community sites, and Abracadoodle art studios. So as you can see, I went through each one of these and just converted it into what I would need from a corporate environment. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions or that have come up on the chat since I've been talking for a few minutes.
Hey there, Judy. Yeah, we have one question so far, and that is just for clarity. So if a person does not own expert level skills in a software that's being used in the role that they're applying for, but they have been the go-to person for a software in their past job. Even if it wasn't expert level, they were the go-to person. And they were the support person for all the colleagues. You consider that a transferable skill, even though someone might not yet know Figma or might not yet know Confluence.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So let me tell you something. How long has Figma been out there? Count them. 1, 2, 5, 10 years. Not long. I mean, it might have been out in the marketplace for 10 years, but when did it hit the major corporations? 3 years ago?
It's still hitting some now.
It's still hitting some, right? So being able to work through new software and become expert on it, that's a skill in itself. Being able to be the techie on the team, to be able to be curious enough to find out how the software works, to find out the nuances and the bugs and the capabilities and how it works. And well, if it's Tuesday and it's raining, it works better if you do this. It's like there's always something that if you like a certain order, it never fails. And so being able to articulate that on a resume, the other thing it tells me is you're a learner and you're going to be able to overcome, because I can promise you Figma is not going to be the last software that's introduced in a corporate environment.
Right. Okay. Well, a follow-up question for that is,
Sure.
how would you recommend articulating the capacity for expertise, the capacity for it, in a way that gets past the ATS and on to a hiring manager or recruiter?
You know what? We're going to talk about language here in a minute. The language that you use for your resume. And then I'm also going to show you some illustrations on how others have displayed similar information. Okay. So let me just hang on to that. And I think I'm going to answer that later in the conversation. Okay.
We have a couple more and we'll just save them. Okay.
Okay. So let's move on. So the other thing that I did is I wanted to illustrate again what the competencies are versus the outcomes. And I have, so the beautification committee chairperson. Okay, that's a leadership role. Hands down, that's a leadership role, right? She's in charge. And then the next one is I put art, craft, and design because that's your God-given gift, right? Your art, your craft, your ability. You might be in an early career and you're honing it, or you've been in the workplace for a while and you're proficient at it. So those are the two things that I pulled out of those three words, right? Leadership, and then there's an element of her art, craft, and design. So the outcome was a beautification of a children's learning environment. That just hits home, right? And so I can visualize the impact that has for other humans, right? And so I went through and again, went through the exercise of, okay, what are their competencies, art, craft, and design? There was some coaching in the high school support teacher role, coaching, some guidance, some facilitation, some training. And then the outcomes are multi-level art education. And so it took me maybe about an hour to go through the professional experience and convert all of these into these competencies and then the outcomes. And so, but it's worth the focus and time to pivot them into different words so that you can resonate with the consumer, with the hiring manager. Again, campus schoolology support teacher, technical skill, proficiency, collaboration, coaching, support. I want a team member that's supportive and collaborative. I want someone who's willing to do peer education and increase the proficiency for the team. That's what I read. For the facilitator for professional learning community. So facilitation, that's a big role here in human-centered design. She has to have professional presence. She has to have large group presentation skills. And again, improved teaching proficiency, improved group management, improved academic performance. And I want to make a mention here where I use the terms improved. If you can show numbers, so I think if I go up, we have like 50 students or 25 plus students. So those are numbers. Business folks love numbers. So if you can quantify your impact, that is all to the good. So I'm going to go back down here. So improve management. So if you can show that the team, improved their management skills from a 50 to a 75, or even a 60 to a 70, whatever it is, that's quite a bit of improvement, right? So whenever you can break down your impact into a numbers representation, it's easier for me to say, wow, that's a measurable impact. Again, you can see, I'm just going to leave, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but you can see where I'm trying to articulate a lot of this into words that are going to be meaningful to the hiring manager. So I wanted to share some full resume layouts. So these are 3, and I want to take each one in turn because there's a lot of good, I tried to cram them all on one slide, so that might be a little compressed. But one thing that stands out is the clean lines, the clean ability for me to consume the information. Again, it's all about how am I making it? It's again using service design or UX design for the reader of your resume. How am I going to consume this information? And I think somewhere, to answer your question, how do you demonstrate your proficiency? So what I like about the one on the left is the term dexterities was used. Okay, I've never heard of that on a resume before. I'm not even sure what that means, but it caught my interest because, it's not a term that is mundane, right? It's like, hey, I have some ability to do these things in this manner. And so as you can see the professional dexterity and the software. And so she's used a rating system to show, where she is very proficient. And you know what? She's not that proficient at some of the other ones, but she has some knowledge. I need to know that too. Even if you have some familiarity with something, knowing that is helpful to me. In the middle one, I really like how the iconography really demonstrates, what I'm looking at. I mean, she has headers to support what the content, but it's very clear to me what that is. And then on the right, again, just the relevant experience. And then, what's graphic, what's interactive, that was very good. And again, her personal brand, and then the iconography. Because let's face it, we're in design. And so good design catches your attention. So if you're putting effort into your resume, I will expect that same effort into the work, right? It just adds on to each other. So I want to talk a little bit about the language too, because I think this kind of answers some of the other questions. So what I really liked about this is the commentary here is engaging, right? Finalize pixel perfect, high fidelity, desktop and mobile wireframes to meet design standards, create pattern libraries and set standards for components and page layouts for final production. Got it. I know what that means. UX designer, work collaboratively with designers and developers, content writers, product owners to create user flows and high fidelity prototypes. Designed to meet business and technical requirements for AT&T Enterprise. Got it. Know what that means. So it's a very dense sentence, and it has all of the components that I'm looking for. It's clear. It's using the right language for me to be able to consume that pretty quickly. So again, I'm going to pause, Paula, and see if there's any questions so far. And I can't hear you, Paula.
Thanks. Seems like they kind of cluster around how do you get the resume past the ATS to the hiring manager, and articulating capacity for expertise in a way that gets it past the ATS to the hiring manager. And
well, you know what, it's going to, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, and it's all about mining the job description. Because there might be some things on here that are a delight for me because, you know, like they're not on my hard list necessarily, but they're addition to what I'm looking for. So, but part of it is if it's on the resume, if it's on the job description that's posted, you're really going to want to make sure that's reflected in some manner on your resume.
To that point, I'm seeing under software, it's really cute. She has the AIPS ID,
Right.
XD, and that's cute, but it wouldn't scan if you had asked for Adobe Illustrator. So I would be careful about that kind of stuff. And well, to your point, yeah.
So the challenge is, and we found this at USAA when we had just a ton of applicants and a ton of job openings, and these are examples. But one of the things that we had to do was pretty much, really no kidding, talk to HR and say, look, you can't be just stripping all of this out of the resumes and expect us to get it. Now, a lot of online systems today, like on Indeed or on LinkedIn, they will allow you to upload your content yourself, and then you can see where it breaks from these visual ones, from these visual resumes. And then I would say then use words that are reflected in the job description. So if they're looking for a mid-level designer in AI, well, then put that on your resume, you know, expert level or proficient level in AI. You're going to have to spell that out. And like I said, a lot of those other systems, when you apply, you can upload your PDF of your resume. But then if you're in a system where that only allows content, you're going to have to translate that content and create yourself a grid, of words, novice, mid-level, proficient, expert, and again, try to reflect what they're looking for. Don't lie. If you're not proficient in something, don't put that you're proficient in it just because they're looking for proficient. But sometimes it's a matter of, you're meeting 5 out of the 4, but you also have that 4th one in your mid-level. So I would definitely go forward in providing your information. Was that helpful?
Somewhat. Maybe it answered some of the questions. Maybe Autumn, would you like to, you have several entries here. Would you like to engage?
Sure.
Yeah, ask a
Sure.
question.
Hello.
Hi.
Curious about just when I've applied for different jobs, I mean, they do want a unicorn, and so this person appears to be a very capable graphic designer. I don't see strategy. She's not a content person. She's not a researcher. So great. I mean, you do like graphic design, super important. But does she know anything about information architecture or this? You know what I mean? Infographics and stuff I see on here. And so it's interesting to me when you apply for jobs, yeah, they want a strategist. They want someone who can do this. And are you also supposed to be a graphic designer? Are you supposed to be a graphic designer who can also be a strategist or a researcher or something else?
So that's a really good question. And thank you very much for asking that question. And it's sometimes the job descriptions are unfair and unrealistic, right? And so, and one of the things that while I was at USAA, we were transitioning quite a bit to a human-centered design practice. And we had moved a lot of designers out of IT where they had just been hired to color the pages and color within the lines. And so now we were taking a lot of folks and moving them into this human-centric. Some of them had never heard of that. And then we were also hiring for that. And you bring up a good point. I would get a lot of applicants, and I finally had to talk to the folks that were feeding me resumes. And I said, look, you're sending me really competent UX designers and graphic designers, but they've never heard of human-centered design. They've never heard, and I would ask this question, if it was a marketing agency person, did y'all practice, were you an agile shop? And they're like, oh yeah, we would really respond to those, requests from the customer. And I'm like, you're broken. That's not the agile I'm looking for. I'm really looking to see if you are familiar with the project management style of agile, right? And so I was getting so many, and I was like, I'm not being able to hire any of the candidates you're sending me because they don't have this additional background. And so how do we let them know what I'm really looking for? That's on the job description, but you're sending me applicants that really don't meet their requirements. And so it's incumbent upon the job description writer to be as accurate as possible. Unfortunately, there's so many times where the job description is too generic for the job description. I've seen that a lot. And only, in more mature design organizations, are they more and more specific about what they're looking for a particular role or a particular slot. that is part of the challenge of, and that's why, I'm going to flip over here in a few minutes to get to the job description. And that's where you really look at the job description. What are they meeting? And then the other thing too is know the company you're going to. See if you can determine how far are they on their human-centered design journey? How far are they using service design? Like look at the other job descriptions around you, around that company. Read through all of them to see, where are you fitting in this rubric? Sometimes they break characteristics off and put all in one, and some over here and some over here and some over here. And so it's really good to get a good understanding of what they're looking for over time and over different job postings, especially if they're out. The postings are out at the same time. So I'm hoping that was somewhat helpful in your question, in answering your question. Okay, good. Well, I'm going to move on here. Again, just some visual examples of job experience, work experience, employment history. There's no one title, but outlining it cleanly. How long were you there? What did you do? How did you do it? This one on the very left, it's very brief. There's more content someplace else in a different fashion. And so again, what's easy for what resonates with you? Plus all of these things give me an indication of who you are. The language that's used, how succinctly you're communicating, and how you format your information. And again, are you giving me more information that I can look through? Education, again, there's different ways of doing it. Here, there's some general assembly. There's no dates on this one at the top right. The top left. And there's lots of different ways to present the information. You need to feel comfortable in how you present your information, but also make it consumable for me I can quickly scan and see that you have the education and the foundation for what skills I'm looking for. Again, so a little bit more riff on how to present skills. Lots of different ways of illustrating that. The scalability and the lists are very easily consumed by a hiring manager. Again, it also gives me some indication of, your design skills. But it's all about communication. For me, I would probably utilize, I am not a visual designer, and Susan can probably vouch for that. But so I would go with something simple, but that communicates, but that's not too complicated, because the more complicated I get, the worse it looks. So I would be more of something simple and consumable, like what's at the bottom. Again, just another couple of ways of showing experience and proficiencies, expertise. The other thing is it also gives me an ability to consume if I've got the right person in my pocket here. So this block in the middle that says expertise, you know what? I wasn't looking for a front-end developer on that day. I wasn't, but I knew someone who was, right? So I'm like, oh, I can't use this person, but I think 2 teams over, they were looking for someone who was more of a front-end person. So maybe I'll shoot them over there. So don't ever be shy on sharing what you can do, even if it's not exactly on target. And then extracurricular activities. There's some different achievements and participation and things that were done. I know that on my own resume, I have a few patents, so hell yeah, I'm putting that on there. I worked with TEDx San Antonio, and I was very proud of that. So you know what? If you're proud of something that you're involved in, show it on your resume, because that shows your engagement with the larger community. So, and then we have quotes. I don't see these very often. I actually, you have an opportunity to give your own personal mission statement, and that's what's here down at the bottom. And I think that's really compelling. If people can articulate who they are very succinctly and gracefully, then I'm going to want to talk to them. And that's what we're trying to get to. And then these other quotes are not even their own, but it also gives an indication of what's important to them. All right, so let's get down to mining the job description. And how are we doing on time?
We are at 7:16, so Q&A should begin in earnest in about 15 minutes.
In about 15 minutes, okay. Sorry, I have no phone, no clock here. Okay, so I just went through this. I just pulled this job description off of LinkedIn, and I went through and pulled those words out of the job description. And so what I'm going to do if I were to apply for this job is just double check, make sure I'm using these action verbs and these words and these phrases: evidence focused, curiosity, coach and mentor, data driven, UX research, thought leadership. Just make sure that those are reflected. And again, those will help connect you to that job description. And let's see, I think I've got just some more action phrases just to, think about how you're phrasing things. What will communicate to the reader, and how will it resonate, and how is it unique? I think, I would read so many resumes in a day. And to be honest, if there was at least one turn of phrase in the content, I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute, what is this one? Because literally going through 20 resumes in a day. I didn't really talk a lot about portfolios because this is transitional, and you may or may not have a portfolio, a web-based portfolio. But what are the words that might resonate with the reader and can catch attention? All right, boom. Q&A.
All right. Thank you very much.
For you?
Thanks, Judy. So we have a stack of questions here, and I think I'm just going to take them from the top. Autumn kind of chimed in earlier. She also had a question about the ATS, and we have several. And they're kind of curious about, you're showing a lot of resume examples that have graphics and symbols and abbreviations, and participants are wondering how those resumes got through to you.
Well, again,
through the ATS.
Well, again, we had to have a heart-to-heart with HR because I was getting resumes that looked like they were printed out on a dot matrix printer, to be honest. Like literally. I'm like, what the hell? It was all broken content and there was no formatting. It was just words, and it was all, just as if someone just ripped off all the words and threw it on a sheet. And so, like I said, we had to have a talk with HR, and that's something that the hiring manager has to do. So on the reverse side, again, making sure your content has not only, the words, but the meanings behind, again, mining that job description and making sure you're using the appropriate language for the job that you're looking for. I would say, because this is, we're seeking design-based roles, that not to disregard the layout of your resume. Mine is not over complicated. You didn't see my example, but
do you mind going back to the 3 examples you had, because that's really useful to see.
And
yeah,
and would you expect the same?
So this is
visual...
like I said, the systems today, usually there is a way to enter the content. So you would basically take each one of these sections when you're applying to a job on Indeed or LinkedIn, or through whatever target companies, their hiring process. They usually have a way to parse out your job history. And you would take this content and copy and paste it into their system. And so you will need to have content over to the side. So maybe your proficiencies, your dexterities over here, like I said, you're going to have to break those down into words if you want to add the content in words to those online systems. But there's typically a way to upload a PDF. I do not know of one system that I have not seen that allows you to parse out the content section by section and edit that before you hit the go button, but also upload a PDF so that then they can see the information organized as you want them to consume it.
So what I hear you saying is that, looking at the example on the left right here in the lower left-hand corner where there's a chart, you would have 2 versions, for example, and you would have the visual, but you would also have a verbal version of that where you have copy and paste capability, and you just copy sections and upload them onto the site.
So even when you're developing something like that, you're going to have some scribble on a piece of paper, like, okay, I get 5 dots on this one and 5 dots on this one. We'll just convert the 5 dots to give yourself a descriptor, right? That's expert level. 4 is proficient. The middle one is midline. 2 is, a little bit above novice, right? So find a word, hit thesaurus.com and find that word. And so because you're going to want to convert that into content so that they can run it through that resume factory. But again, you'll want to have a visual resume, something that's organized and visually appealing.
Would you expect the same level of graphic design from a strategy or a research person?
No.
Okay.
No. I can tell you that because I'm that kind of person. I'm not. I actually get my my visual designer friends to help me.
Awesome.
Okay. So, but that's not my number one skill. And I defer to the folks that have the talent in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Patty asks, I know several statistical softwares and many different types of analyses. This person must be a researcher. What is a better way to translate these skills? Just mentioning the types of software and analyses, or it's better to talk about the actual study and how the results impact my field?
I would do both, because I need to see what your experience is and what those outcomes. So again, the competencies. So what type of analytics are you talking about? Qualitative, quantitative, deep data? What are you talking about? And then what are the outcomes from your work? So I was a qualitative researcher, and I was able to do, provide product insights for product that change the direction of the product, and we sold a gajillion of them, right? So what did you do? How did you do it? And what was the outcome? And then if there's a system involved, maybe you used a data repository like Dovetail. Well, I need to know that, because I might have Dovetail, or I might know what Dovetail is, or I have a competitor of Dovetail. And so that just helps me know, because a lot of times, even if it's something similar, a lot of these softwares work very similarly. So if the concept is there, then I'll know that you have a skill that you can transfer.
Okay, cool. Lonnie asks, how many years back should a resume go?
The farther, okay, so I'm a little long in the tooth. So mine goes way back, but there's a lot less information about those early years and more information about the more recent years. So I would put, so my history goes all the way back, not to, not Winchell's Donuts when I was 14. I didn't include that. But, what was my first corporate job? What was my first, career job that I would want? They don't know that I worked at Macy's. They don't know that. But, what was your first real corporate job, or your experience while you were in school that helped you get to where you are? Okay. And I would say, if you were in your early career, I would definitely keep some of those summer jobs on your resume, because one of the things that I learned over time was, it's very hard for early career folks who had never had a job coming into the corporate environment, really calibrate and get used to the work environment, and have different pressures on them than they had ever had in before. And so, for me, I honestly got to a point where I'm like, if you don't even know how to work with others on a team, that's going to be an obstacle. And so if you're early in your career and you have some experience, even if it's waiting tables, because you're serving others, you're providing delight, you're considering your customers, that's important to me. So I would say it depends on where you are in your career. But yeah, the more career, the more corporate work, or true career work that you're doing, some of those early things can start to drop off. So hope that's helpful.
Fantastic. Okay. Another question we have, and this seems to be a real nut for a seed question for this whole event, is how often do you find yourself taking a chance on those with transferable skills who have professional history but have never worked in the industry versus established UXers?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that question. Okay. That's such a personal question too, because I'm a risk taker. I've hired a lot of folks. I've hired, I hired one of my first hires, was a guy who, he had a lot of industry experience, but a lot of people didn't want to hire him because he was kind of a bull in a china shop. And I really don't like a lot of confrontation. I'm like, I'm hiring this guy. I need his counterpart on my team. But I also hired a young man who was just getting into design. He had self-taught himself, coding and things like that. And he was kind of moving into UI, UX, and then he wanted to get in human-centered design. And one of the things in his resume that stuck out to me is he wanted to try human-centered design, and he went to the VP of his former employer and he talked to them and said, will you let me do this? And they said yes. And so he got to spend the next year testing and trying and failing and working through human-centered design. I'm like, you're on my team, because this is a mess we got here, and we're just establishing this. And so I need people who are not afraid of trying and trying and trying. And so I would say, and then I've had peer design directors who were like, if they don't have 7 years, I'm like, okay, well, let me talk to them, because you never know. And I've hired some people that I took a risk on, and you know what, they didn't pan out. And so, then I had to kind of walk that back. And so, but it's really incumbent upon the hiring director. And
Okay.
so, that's not a very good answer. But unfortunately, that's kind of the truth.
Well, I think it gives us more insight than we might have had before. I've never asked that question, so thank you.
I've been an industrial designer for at least 16 years, developing products. I mean, I have a master's degree in industrial design. I even took a experience design studio when I was in school in the early 2000s. And to me, it's developing. I've worked in product development for furniture manufacturers and all of that. And it's basically just segueing from physical to digital. And I did the UX program at SMU, so in an internship. But nonetheless, it's that there's this thing of, well, you don't have 7 years in UX or this much. I'm like, it's parts is parts. It's developing product.
Yeah, I would see your experience in industrial design. You have, when I look at industrial design, I'm like, okay, you're working with particular constraints. Okay, they're not software constraints, but they're material constraints. They're supply constraints. There's, manufacturing constraints. You got to get the right screw to get on that chair, or otherwise it's going to be pokey on your behind if you're sitting on it. So, there's a whole lot of different things that you consider, but I would really emphasize on your resume your experience working in product development. Kind of take it. You can use the foundation of industrial design, but I would kind of take it up a level and then look at all of those skills, right? You collaborated on those designs. You had to work with different areas of the company. You had to deal with suppliers and material purveyors. You had to really understand the manufacturing process, what would make it through the production process and what wouldn't. So all of those things are things, to be honest, I always look for people who are conscientious and can see problems, that are coming towards them. And so I would really focus on your ability to anticipate, your ability to understand the circumstances, understand the environment, and try to pivot it into the digital environment, right? Because we're still working with humans, and we're still working with an interface. It's just digital. and the, really understanding the behaviors of that interface, right? Because it's a digital behavior versus, maybe it's the rendering rate, or the colors, or whatever that might be for whatever you're designing. But is all those things that you have to take into consideration for the final product to come to fruition. So hope that's a little bit more helpful. But having years of experience just dealing with others is quite something to consider.
Judy, do you mind talking about the makeup of a design team in a larger organization?
Sure. I sure can. So when we were pulling together the chief design office at USAA, like I said, we pulled in together lots of different groups out of IT, and we kept each team in their domain for a period of time, just so that there wasn't that much disruption. But what we were trying to do is, depending on the type of domain that the team was focused on, we would build a team to focus on that. So I had like 6 teams at one time, but so let's take one of them. One was member messaging. So there was, how are the members being communicated to for every product? Was there something that was ubiquitous for the whole team, for the whole company? And then there were specific messagings for each product. And what did those say? So for that team, we needed people who were good content writers. We had to have folks that were good with interaction design. We had to have a producer who was basically a project manager that understood the language of design. So I think we had, typically we have a lead, a senior, and then some early career folks that maybe were, out of college, 2 to 3 years, and then 3 to 6 years. And then the seniors, depending on their capacity and their competencies, then they, were able to do more. The leads typically were people who had been in the industry for a very long time and had a long industry experience, but also maybe had been with the company for a long time. And they also had responsibility to help onboard and shepherd the other team. So messaging example, we had like the senior and lead were really good at content. The producer was an early career. He was like a 2, like kind of mid-career. And then we had 2, like another visual designer on that team that was maybe a midline, because that wasn't the focus of the team. So for one of my teams, we had employee experience. We did a lot of internal interactions. So I actually did have someone who had front-end developer skills, because a lot of the internal work we had to do ourselves. So I had kind of an early to mid-career guy who did my front-end design for me. And then I had an early career visual designer. She was fantastic. But my service designer had to be the lead, because really needed to understand how all of these different touch points work together. So my strongest person was on service design, and then these other 2 were supporting that. And then, of course, I had a producer who could manage all of the work from a project management perspective. So it depended on what that team's goal was. And then, of course, we had like a mobile team, and all of them had to be pretty proficient in mobile, both in Android and iOS. And so that was really heavily focused on doing comps all day, every day. So
cool.
No matter what level they were at.
Okay.
But
Very
not
cool.
everybody has to be an artist. Not
No,
everybody has
I'm not
to be
an
a
artist.
researcher.
I can promise
know.
you, I am not a visual designer, and I kind of break out into sweat when I have to do a presentation. But so I have other strengths, thank goodness, right? Yeah, I am not a visual designer. You don't have to be a visual designer, especially in the user experience. A lot of people, it's not you, it's them. I can promise you, because once people realize what you're trying to accomplish in making that interaction design better, which really doesn't necessarily mean, graphic design. It's really, how is it functioning, and how are you representing that function in a mock-up so that people can consume that and understand the question at hand, or how that flow is going to work. And so it's really important work, and it's just really hard to, I think collectively, I think we all have work to do in educating the people that we want to work for, and who we want to partner with internally and externally.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. And there's a question asked of chat participants, so I want to point your attention over there. Naomi wants to hear from you, but there's also a question for Judy from Joe. I hope I'm saying Joe correctly. As a person transitioning to UX, how many projects would you say one would have to do to be considered proficient? And based on that, how would you sell yourself to a recruiter and a hiring manager?
That's a really good question. And I would say there's no one answer to that. And I'll tell you why. Because you could be working on the same project, the one project, for 3 years. And in those 3 years, gain enough experience to be proficient. If you're working, and again, it all depends about the circumstances in which you're working. So when I was in my early career, I was working in a very small organization. We didn't even have a design team. I was it. I didn't even know I was a designer. And so, but I did everything because there was no one else to do it. They were like, Judy, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so I did everything. And so, but make sure you document what you're doing. Think about the competencies that you're using and those outcomes. And I would say really stretch on those outcomes. Really talk about what the project was about, what challenges you had. You really don't learn anything just by reading a book. You have to practice it. And so that's, talk a little bit about, kind of weave into your summary, what you've learned over those brief 3 years, or because it kind of depends. And I would say that if I saw a lot of little projects, I wouldn't consider, if I saw a high number, I wouldn't necessarily, if they were like 1 month a piece, I'm like, okay, you did something very minor. That's not enough time to really get in deep into a project. And because really, frankly, the tough part of the project is not only the challenge, the technical challenge you're trying to overcome, but also working with the same group over a period of time, and how you collaborated and were partners and part of the team is something that I'm gonna look for.
Judy, would you say that it would be appropriate to put in a portfolio projects that are not UX at all, but demonstrate these very important soft skills involved in collaboration, presentation, and just to show that you have transferable skills? They may not be focused on agile, they may not be focused on or even coming close to using the software or the tools or the ceremonies that are used in a UX situation, but they demonstrate capacity and they demonstrate maturity.
Right. Well, and kind of going back to the presentation that I was talking about, and looking at the educator that I was transitioning, being able to manage 25 young individuals all day, every day, that takes some coordination, that takes some awareness, that takes some energy. And I want to know that I'm hiring someone who that has the capacity to keep going and make it through the day and doesn't get upset by the little things and just keeps going. So I would absolutely say yes. Again, couch it in a way that I can see how this is going to be beneficial to the job at hand. So trying to read between the line on that job description, seeing how, so like if it says something like, looking for strategic thinkers, I can see on some of the notes here about, psychology or healthcare or things like that, being able to anticipate needs or see the big vision, or help others understand the situation, or however you want to rephrase that and move that into one of the goals of the items on the job description.
Hi friends, thank you for watching. If you like the content, please leave a like and subscribe. Join our Slack channel and visit our website in the description below to find more about our events.